Tips analysis.
An interesting trend lately that I've seen in chats and other places that games have been called easy nowadays. There's this trend where people think that games are too full of tutorials, too easy to get through. It just takes, very little effort to kind of master a game to them. But here's the question I want to ask. I've certainly played the games that they're referring to from the SNES days and the NES days, and yes, they are quite difficult. But is there a reason for it, or is it not really as big of a difference as we think it is, but rather that certain aspects are easier than others? Well, let's get into it. So, allow me to explain this very clearly, my thoughts on all this. When it comes to SNES and NES games, I've played quite a few of them. And yes, they are certainly challenging, but keep in mind a couple of things. One thing is that they actually take less time than most of the games that would be today. And two, the reason that they're challenging isn't necessarily because the developers wanted them to be challenging in the way that they are. When it comes to games like The Legend of Zelda, Mega Man 3, all those things, Mega Man 3, by the way, was an interesting game to beat and was very difficult. But a lot of the actual difficulties from the game come from two things. And one is that they want you to play the game for as long as possible when it comes to it, so of course you're going to die. Two, the fact that a life system exists is actually because of the inability of the systems at the time to be able to save all those kinds of states. So it wasn't really possible for them at the time, so chances are if that was possible, they probably would have already had checkpoints more in games. Three, when it comes to difficulty, a lot of it comes from a kind of, again, it has to do with the era, more with the NES and the SNES, but it has to do with the mechanics of the game itself, the capabilities of the system to read things, and the fact that it's not incredibly intuitive. Now, that's where a lot of the difficulty comes from, so it's not necessarily an intentional difficulty, except for the fact that they're trying to lengthen the game. But as time has gone on, they've had other ways of doing that. Rather than trying to keep the player in a specific place for a long period of time, they have an expansive amount of content for the player to explore. So rather than making it die all the time in specific places, they've made it so that it's more like you can explore and do things relatively easily with, of course, some specific challenges that you're supposed to have more trouble with, because that's part of the fun. It's like with the Mario games. The Mario games, generally speaking, nowadays are pretty easy. Mario Odyssey is incredibly easy to beat and to get most of the moons in the game, but the fun doesn't come from that. It comes from finding ways to do it and from expanding on what you can do. Breath of the Wild is challenging to start off, but I don't think it's that difficult to go on. It's more about challenging the mechanic. It's like not challenging, mastering the mechanics, and once you master those mechanics, you're better at the game. And yes, that's more akin to older games, but Breath of the Wild is a much more massive version of that, and it's much more rewarding, in my opinion. Now, when it comes to other things, when it comes to other games, Dark Souls, for instance, which does put itself more in difficulty, it also doesn't do it in the way that it used to be. Rather than punishing you for every death you have, with the exception of Dark Souls 2, the game actually forces you to try to get back to where you were. It challenges you rather than saying, oh, okay, you lost here, so obviously you're going to lose everything now. No, if you die again, you can't learn from your mistakes, then you're going to lose everything. And that's a really clever system, a really clever way of making the game more challenging. Now, that's honestly the biggest part of my argument when it comes to this. I don't think that games are inherently more challenging nowadays. I just think that we go through specific areas easily now. Now, as for when it comes to tutorials, I'll agree. I think tutorials are too explicit nowadays. I think there's too much violating the rules show don't tell. I think that there's a lot of that problem, and I think that games have been doing these kinds of things for forever, where they've been trying to show you how to do things without directly telling you how. Metroid is famous for it because it does it so incredibly well. And that's started to come up more often now, like in better ways. Some of it has to do with the fact that there's just some very complicated things. Like JRPGs, it's kind of hard to do that because you're stuck in a specific system. So without telling you how to play the game, you can't really understand certain mechanics, but there are always hidden mechanics that you don't quite know about, hidden stats or skills that just aren't never told to you, but you kind of figure out. Dark Souls has these as well. And it's never directly told to you. And again, actually Dark Souls does everything. It never explains anything to you. You have to figure it all out on your own. But that's kind of an exception to the rule because it's designed to be that way. But yeah, RPGs in general, especially turn-based ones, can't really use the show-don't-tell system, but games like Mario Odyssey have been much better about it. Although it does kind of tell you how to jump and stuff, but it kind of expects you to learn how to do different things. In fact, I think the most annoying part about the game is the tutorial segment between each world where it tells you how to do something, where the blocks that you hit and then it like, or the blocks that you hit and, or not hit, what was it? You read something and it like tells you how to do a signpost. And it tells you how to do something you already know how to do, and you're like, no, don't let me do it. No, I know what I'm doing. But that's like the annoying part of it. Mario Odyssey otherwise isn't too bad. There's lots of things it doesn't really tell you how to do, and you kind of have to figure out and play around with the mechanics on your own. So that part's pretty cool. And then Breath of the Wild was like, yes, it told you the basics of how to use something, and you had to figure everything else out, which is fantastic. That's exactly the way it should be with a Zelda game. I think Mario is for a slightly younger audience than Zelda. I know that they're both technically directed towards children, but Mario, just generally speaking, wants to do. And that's kind of what it is, too, is that the issue with games in general is that you have to expect your audience, especially since it's a much wider audience now, you have to expect your audience to have a low point in terms of what they're going to immediately understand and what they've experienced, and they need to have a way of making sure that the lowest entry level can enter the game and enjoy it, because they want to sell as many copies as they possibly can. So it's like those kinds of things are there in that sense, in my opinion. But in terms of all of that, like, I don't know. When it comes to tutorials, I do agree that they're a little too like that, and I think that they could, even with the newer players, as long as it's done well, I think something like Breath of the Wild is a great entry-level game because it does so much in it, and it encourages you to explore, so if you do badly, it doesn't punish you for that too badly. And it's just like, yeah, just learn how to play the game, and you'll have fun as you go along. It's not that punishing to most people. Of course, there are always people who are going to be an exception to the rule, but that's just life. Yeah, so yeah, I just think that overall tutorials have gotten a little out of control, but I think that they're improving in a lot of ways, especially because the game seems to be improving a lot on it. I mean, we went from Skyward Sword, which was considered to be the most annoying in terms of the tutorial entry stuff, and the Twilight Princess as well was pretty bad for it. And then we got Breath of the Wild, which is much, much better. So, and it's kind of odd because everybody who plays those kinds of games would be more like, they would know how a Zelda game plays, so why would they bother doing that was kind of the question. And again, it has to do with the entry level. They should give you an option to skip those kinds of tutorials too, especially if you played so many Zelda games. But I guess since it was the first motion control Zelda game for Skyward Sword, they just assumed everybody needed help. And same with, actually I guess Twilight Princess was too, but Skyward Sword was more heavily motion control based. Anyway, yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. I think that when it comes to whether games are harder or easier than they used to be, I don't think there's actually that much of a difference. I think it has to do more with the size of the games themselves and the accessibility to the user. So yes, things in general are easier, but the game in and of itself still takes lots of time to complete, and there are also going to be challenges that are much more difficult than some of the things we even knew from back then. Mario's great for doing that, for giving you that challenge level at the end, which absolutely requires you to have like perfect platforming and understanding of the abilities in the game. And that's fantastic. I love that. I love those kinds of levels. But yeah, so I don't think the games are actually overall easier. I just think that it's been kind of expanded out in that regard. And in some ways, I think that's a good thing. I think it's better to have a game be more interesting than it is like mechanically difficult, because of the fact that the controls just aren't perfect, and that has to do with limitation on systems. Zelda 1 is notorious for that, especially with its RNG system. Sometimes that completely messes you up, and there's nothing you can really do about it when it comes to like whiz robes and stuff. It's like, I'm just gonna pop up right on top of you, and then you're dead. not that happens that often, but it's like, it's hard to pay attention to everything at once, in that case, and then it's like, yeah, Zelda 1 gave me I had a little bit of gripe with the way it was overall done, but I get with the limitations of the system, the way that it works, it's fine, just noting those things. Anyway, so I think that's pretty much it. Games are not that much harder, or much easier than they used to be, it's just that the way that they're difficult is more to do with the length than it is to do with specific challenges in the game. And that's for the most part. There are obviously things like Celeste, Dark Souls, Cuphead, all those things that really do still challenge the player, and are just as hard, if not harder, than the games that used to come out on the NES and SNES. Yeah. Bye. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps with the channel, and it's always appreciated. I'm going to leave some links here so you can go check out some other stuff on my channel, or you can always just search the channel. There's lots of stuff for people, playlists, and all that stuff. And so on that note, thank you again. Have a great day, and remember to keep positive.